what Sriranga is discussing here is that there are many possible ways of finding a solution, spiritual solution to your problem of suffering and limitation in the world. First, he has discussed in the previous one that the Buddhist says that you come out of your body-mind life. Don't identify yourself with body-mind life. Your problem will end. So that is the Buddhistic solution and the Mayavada solution. The world is considered to be unreal, and you come out and your problem is solved. But what happens is, problem is solved means the problem itself disappears. Because the world disappears for you. It becomes it's no more a reality. It's only a shadow play. So the problem itself disappears. As we said, he himself says, okay, that the problem is solved by the operation is successful. The operation of getting out of suffering, but the patient dies. The problem is solved. There is no more suffering for anybody. The second one is you remain in the physical world and don't be affected by the impurities of the physical world. But that does not change the so-called impurities in the physical world. Individually you have solved the problem. Okay, so you have solved the problem for yourself, but what about all the others? They are also there and still suffering. So that is what he is going to discuss now. The next one. Okay, it is possible to escape from the problem otherwise. So what is the problem? The problem is suffering and limitation and falsehood. When you see all those things, you don't want to participate in that and you want to escape from it. So these are the solutions that he is discussing. The problem is the suffering in the physical world. I am taking only the suffering, but there is also ignorance. He has told you that earlier. There is ignorance and there is lack of power. There is no ananda. All these problems are there. Okay? Unity is not there. There is disharmony. So I am concentrating only on the problem of suffering because that is the most prominent one. And that's what he has also said. But it's actually the undivine in the physical world is all these things. Knowledge, unity, power, ananda, and suffering. All these things are there. So it is possible to escape from the problem otherwise. What is the solution is offering? Or admitting always the essential presence, we see that the divine presence is there in the physical world. We can endeavor to justify the divinity of the manifestation by correcting the human view of perfection or putting it aside as a too limited mental standard. We may say that you are not seeing the divine, but the divine is there. Why are you concentrating on the imperfections? Concentrate on the divine and you will have no problem at all. That is another way of solving the problem. We may say that not only is the spirit in things absolutely perfect and divine, but each thing also is relatively perfect and divine in itself. Relatively perfect. If you see only matter, it's perfectly okay. You can take that matter and do so many things of it. Okay? At its level, it is perfect. At the animal level, the animal is perfect. It is obeying the laws that are meant to be obeyed in that field. The mental also is perfect. This is what happens when the involution is taking place. In the involution, all these worlds are created and they are perfectly fine within themselves. The problems arise when there is an evolution from down upwards. Okay, so this is what he's saying. So is relatively perfect and divine in itself, in its expression of what it has to express, of the possibilities of existence. It is not meant to do something else. The animal is expressing exactly what it is intended to do. In its assumption of its proper place in the complete manifestation. Each plane is perfect in itself. Each thing is divine in itself because each is a fact, an idea of the divine being. The divine has intended all these planes to be exactly what they are. So don't complain. Okay. In itself, because each is a fact and idea of the divine being. Knowledge and will fulfilling itself infallibly in accordance with the law of that particular manifestation. Whatever is intended, okay, there's a rule and a law that says, I will manifest this in this way. And it does exactly what is intended. And this is the divine intention. The divine intention need not be perfection at every level. It can be so many other things also. So, of course, you can ask why the divine is creating imperfection. But that is another subject. We'll have to go into that little detail, because it's again, if you remember, the adventure of consciousness. The divine hides himself in the opposite of himself and is emerging from it, and it's a challenge for him. And he is taking up the challenge not once, but repeatedly, because there are 100,000 million ways of escaping and solving the problem. So that's why he is doing it through each individual. So I go next to the next sentence. Each being is possessed of the knowledge, the force, the measure and kind of delight of existence, precisely proper to its nature. Whatever it is intended to be, it is doing. You can't expect anything else from it. Each works in the gradations of experience decreed by secret inherent will, a native law, an intrinsic power of the self, and occult significance. The intention is something quite different. Even in the physical world, sometimes when you have an intention and you start, this start does not reveal the intention of the person. Okay, so this is what often happens. Even in politics, even in nation building. Okay, suppose you want to build a dam. You're going to build a dam, but what do? You start blasting the mountain. Exactly the opposite. You're starting destruction. So if you see only the beginning, you will feel confused. You will say, "Arey, you wanting to build something and you are destroying. What the hell is that?" But that is the. So don't see only the early stages of these different plans. The physical world, the vital world, the mental world. All these are imperfect if you compare them with others, but they're exactly what they're supposed to be. So we should look at the whole and not the parts. That's exactly what is being said. So if you look only at the parts in themselves, they're perfectly exactly what they should be. So fulfills a part in which the perfection, actual and progressive, of the universal harmony. Note the word progressive. There's a progressive harmony. The adaptation of all in it to its whole purpose, and its whole sense is helped and completed. If to us things appear undivine, if we hasten to condemn this or that phenomenon as inconsistent with the nature of a divine being, it is because we are ignorant of the sense and purpose of the divine in the world in its entirety. That's exactly what I told you, that if you see only the beginning of the action, then it seems very funny to you. But the end is always something very nice. Okay. It reminds me of a very interesting example. Suddenly the idea came into my head. You know, Sunilda, he is the one who composed Savitri music. No? So, you know, Sunilda he was my teacher also. So he was telling us one day, he was very good at anything. Okay? He was good at music, he was good at botany, he was a very intelligent person, he was good in football. Okay. He was a football captain of the ashram team. So he was telling me one day how in an inter-college chess championship, he was participating and it was the final. Okay. It's a very interesting story. So he saw the position on the chessboard and suddenly realized that there is a very interesting solution because he had read about that. So what he did, he started one by one sacrificing all his pieces. He first sacrificed the rook, then he sacrificed the horse, then he sacrificed the knight. He went on like that. And everybody is wondering, who are watching, what the hell is he doing? He is going to lose. He is going on doing exactly the opposite of what he is supposed to do. And then suddenly, after the fourth or fifth sacrifice, he gave check and mate. Okay. And he won the championship. So now this is exactly what Sri Aurobindo is saying here, that the beginnings, okay, matter, life and mind, they are the beginnings. And when you see them as imperfect. But if you see the intention of the divine, he is going to end in a very, very happy note. Okay, so that's exactly what he's saying here. Not in exactly these words, but that's the intention. So you have to see the end product and not only the beginning. So if you see from the end point of view, all these planes of imperfection are exactly what they're supposed to be. And they have an intention. That's exactly what he's saying. Okay. I gave you two examples, and the chess example, suddenly it came into my mind. It's a good example. that in the beginning, matter is the beginning of the evolution, life is the beginning, second beginning, third beginning, and they all seem to be very, very imperfect. But if you know the end, then you will understand the reason for all these imperfections. That's what I'm saying. But we have to see now. Perfection cannot reside in the thing in its separateness. For that separateness is an illusion. Perfection is the perfection of the total divine harmony. So this is what he's saying. Now, I'll read out the summary and then we'll discuss it some other part of the thing. Now, what he's saying here, I'm summarizing for you. There is another possible solution to the problem. Okay? We may admit the divine presence in all things, and we may say that man's view and understanding of the universe is defective. It is too limited, mental, ignorant. We try to set up our ignorance as the perfect standard of judgment. It can be said that not only is the secret indwelling divine perfect in itself, but even each thing is perfect in its place and significance in the totality, and it fulfills its function to perfection. You may say that. Stemner is not agreeing fully, but he says it's possible to take this stand. Man does not see the whole and thus misses the real significance of each thing. The nature of each thing is exactly what its function is in the universe, what it is supposed to do. Our condemnation of imperfect things is therefore itself ignorant and partial. Okay? So, perfection cannot be in the part, it can only be found in the whole. That's what he's saying. All right? Quite clear? So he doesn't agree with the view that is being taken, but he says that that's also, you can solve an individual problem. You can say, I am concentrating only on the divine, I am not concentrating on the others, so I have no problem. But it doesn't solve the problem at a universal level. The suffering in the universe remains the same. So the problem is not solved. So now we go to the next sentence, next para. All this may be true up to a certain point. So one of you has to read. Today, I think only 3 of you are there, I think, today. Nah? Sunki is there, Archanadi is there, and maybe Shilpa. I can't because I am on my phone. I can't see. So somebody has to read, either Sunki or Archanadi. Okay. Shilpa, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, you are also there, but my phone is showing only 2 people. Okay.
Shall I read?
All right. Yes, please. Please.
The paragraph is all this, no?
All this may be.
Yes. All this may be true up to a certain point and so far as it goes. But this also is a solution incomplete by itself and it cannot give us an entire satisfaction. It takes insufficient account of the human consciousness and the human view from which we have to start. It does not give us the vision of the harmony it alleges, and so it cannot meet our demand or convince, but only contradicts by cold intellectual conception our acute human sense of the reality of evil and imperfection. It gives, too, no lead to the psychic element in our nature, the soul's aspirations towards light and truth and towards spiritual conquest, a victory over imperfection and evil. By itself, this view of things amounts to little more than the facile dogma which tells us that all that is right because all is perfectly decreed by the divine wisdom. It supplies us with nothing better than a complacent intellectual and philosophic optimism. No light is turned on the disconcerting fact of pain, suffering, and discord to which our human consciousness bears constant and troubling witness. At most, there is a suggestion that in the divine reason of things, there is a key to these things to which we have no access. This is not a sufficient answer to our discontent and our aspiration, which, however ignorant in their reaction, however mixed their mental motives, must correspond to a divine reality deeper down in our being, a divine whole that is perfect by reason of the imperfection of its parts, run the risk of itself being only perfect in imperfection, because it fulfills entirely some stage in an unaccomplished purpose. It is then a present but not an ultimate totality. To it, we could apply the Greek saying, Theos ok estin ala gignetai. The
What a
divine,
very big.
the divine is not yet in being, but is becoming. The true divine would then be secret within us and perhaps supreme above us. To find the divine within us and above us would be the real solution. To become perfect as that is perfect, to attain liberation by likeness to it or by attaining to the law of its nature. Sadrasya sadramaya, sadharmaya,
Sadrishya, sadharmya.
sadharmaya.
Sadrishya means that which is similar to, and sadharmya, that which is, you have the same dharma. Okay, so this is what he's saying. So, very interesting paragraph. He is telling you that these are possible solutions. You can have these. He has discussed several solutions, because when Srimad is dealing, he will tell you what his idea is, but he is also telling you how others are solving the problem. So he has already told you about the Buddhists. Escape the problem. It is possible to escape the problem. Don't sit down and start howling and crying and saying, oh, there is no solution to the problem. Okay? Don't think like that. It's possible. Escape from your body mind life. Problem is solved. Number two, you can remain in the physical world and still, like the, make yourself absolutely immune to the sufferings in the physical world. This also is the second solution. The third solution that is offering here, or rather he is not offering, he is telling the others are saying, okay, that there is evil in the world, okay, but if you look at everything in a very detailed manner, you will see that there is also a lot of perfection. So concentrate on that. Okay? So this is saying is a partial solution, and it does not take account of the. Now we come to the difference between the self and the psychic being. What Srimad is saying is that the psychic being is there within you, and this view that everything is perfect in the world is knowledge aspect. When you go to the knowledge aspect, you come out of your body mind life and go above, vertically above, into the self. So there you have escaped the problem and the problem is solved for you. But it does not solve the problem at the universal level. Suffering still continues for the others. Now he is saying why this problem is not uh, solved at all by escaping from it. Because the divine element is there in you. You are ignoring the psychic being. The psychic being is not vertically, it is horizontally inside you. And the psychic is saying, I am not satisfied with the suffering. Why should there be suffering in the world? Okay. So when you have that, there is a dissatisfaction. The psychic being is not happy with its own. It feels itself for others also pain. So, and the pain is not going away by your remaining immune to it. So he's saying that you have to take into account the psychic being also. And when you take into account the psychic being, then the world appears to be very, very imperfect, and you have to admit that. Okay? So you have to find another solution. That's what he's saying. And also, in a certain way, what he's saying here, okay, there is a, he's calling it, remember, okay, he's calling it, by itself, this view of things amounts to a little more than a facile dogma. Facile dogma. I used the word yesterday of shallow optimism. Okay? This shallow optimism also is one of the things that are there. I told you yesterday about Robert Browning's poem Pippa Passes. Okay, and I'm reading out to you 4 lines from there, or 6 lines actually, 8 lines, sorry, and how it's an example of a cheap, shallow optimism. He is writing, the year is at the spring. There is spring after winter, so everything is wonderful. And the day is at the morn. Night has gone away and there is night. Morning is there, light is there. Morning is at 7 and the hillside is dew pearl. There is dew and dew is so beautiful on the hillside. The lark is on the wing. Okay? The lark is flying. It is not injured at all. The lark is the bird. It's on the wing. And the snail is on the thorn. The snail is sitting on the thorn and the thorn should prick it, but it is still there. God is in heaven and all is right with the world. Okay? This is a poem. Now, this is a pakka example, Srivendra says, of easy, cheap, shallow optimism. Why? Because you're looking only at one side and saying everything is perfect, but you're turning a blind eye to the suffering of others. Okay? So that is not a solution. That's what Srivendra is saying. So having said this, now we go back to the beginning of the para and look at each sentence. Okay? According to Srivendra, this way of looking at things is not a solution because he wants a solution for entire imperfection of the physical world, not the individual solution. Individual solution, yes. An individual can escape and the problem is solved for him, but not at a universal level. Now, I'm reading each sentence. All this may be true up to a certain point. It is true for the individual and so far as it goes. But this also is a solution incomplete by itself and it cannot give us an entire satisfaction. Now, there you are. He says it takes insufficient account of the human consciousness and the human view from which we have to start. And the human view always wants harmony, ananda, okay, joy, capacity. It wants all these things. It does not give us the vision of the harmony, it alleges. And so it cannot meet our demand or convince, but only contradicts by cold intellectual conception our acute human sense of the reality of evil and imperfection. If you use your mind, you can take that stand, but you're not taking into account the ananda aspect, the psychic aspect. It gives to no lead to the psychic element in our nature. There you are. You have to take also into account not only the mind, but also the psychic element, the soul's aspiration towards light and truth, and towards a spiritual conquest, a victory over imperfection and evil. Individual problem solved, but not the universal problem. By itself, this view of things amounts to a little more than the facile dogma. The word facile in French, you have to say facile. Facile means very easy. It's an easy dogma which tells us that all is right because all is perfectly decreed by the divine wisdom. Srivendra used the word facile here. He could have used the word easy. And in fact, when we use the word facility, okay, it is, in fact, there was somebody who got very puzzled by the word facility. Srivendra, he has written in Life Divine that the downward movement, the manifestation, okay, it falls very easily down. And you use the word facility. Normally, when we use the facility, we think of convenience. Okay, so it's you go into some place and you ask, you want to know where the bathroom is. Okay, you say washroom, or you use the word facility. Is there a facility here? So facile means easy, not necessarily convenient. Okay, facile dogma, which tells us that all is right because all is perfectly decreed by the divine wisdom. The divine himself has told all this, so how can it be imperfect? You are seeing it wrong. It supplies us nothing better than a complacent intellectual and philosophical optimism. Very complacent. Complacent means self-satisfied. You are very, very satisfied. I am looking at it in the right way. The divine has created everything, so why should it be imperfect? You are looking at it in the wrong way. That's the solution that is being offered by this way of looking at things. But it doesn't solve the problem for others. You may solve the problem for yourself and you may concentrate on it. There is a certain truth to that. So I'm saying all this may be true up to a certain level. Individual has solved his problem. He is ignoring the imperfections. But you can't do that. You have to be very, very, you have to see that there are other elements also. it supplies us with nothing better than a complex and intellectual and philosophical optimism. It's not a real optimism, it's not a total optimism, only philosophical and intellectual. No light is turned on the disconcerting facts of pain, suffering, and discord to which our human consciousness bears constant and troubling witness. Constantly there is suffering and pain, and you have to account for that. Everybody else is suffering and there is a pain. You may be not suffering, you are concentrating only on the positive things, but you have to take into account the others. Discord to which our human consciousness bears constant and troubling witness. At most, there is a suggestion that in the divine reason of things, there is a key to these things to which we have no access. You can console everybody by saying, okay, you are suffering now, but there is a solution to it. But you are not offering the solution. This is not a sufficient answer to our discontent, and our aspiration is not a sufficient answer to our discontent and our aspiration, which, however ignorant in its reaction, however mixed their mental motives, must correspond to a divine reality deeper down in our being. So here also there are two things. There are intellectual people who see the imperfection in the physical world. There is suffering, there is imperfection, yes, we admit, but we can't do anything about it. Okay? That's one way of looking at it. There are others who are slightly more optimistic and they don't want to find fault with the divine. Yes, there is imperfection, but God has a plan. God has a plan. Why don't you look at that? Okay? Concentrate, have faith. But that also doesn't solve the problem. Okay, you may have faith, but your suffering continues. So that also is not enough to the same. Okay? This is not a sufficient answer to our discontent and aspiration, because when the everybody in the world ultimately wants a solution to their problem of suffering and pain. However mixed their mental motives, must correspond to a divine reality deeper down in our being. So you have to justify the pain and give a solution to it. A divine whole that is perfect by reason, a divine whole that is perfect by reason of the imperfection of its parts, runs the risk of itself being perfect in imperfection, because it fulfills either some stage in the because it fulfills entirely some stage in an unaccomplished purpose. You are not seeing the purpose, what it is doing. So it itself becomes imperfect. It is then, the way of looking at things is imperfect. It is then a present, but not an ultimate totality. There you are. You should not look only at the present or the beginning, but you must see the ultimate totality. To it, we could apply the Greek saying, whatever it is, and the Surendra's translated also. And the Surendra's translation is, the divine is not yet in being, it is becoming. So the divine is up there and he is perfect. But you are in the physical world, which is moving towards that, but it's becoming. Becoming is dynamic movement. But the divine is being up there, perfect, without any movement, static condition, because he is perfect. He doesn't need to change. But you are changing, so be patient. Okay? You could say that this is what the philosophy that is discussing here could say that. Okay? Be patient and you will see the total. But in the meanwhile, you are suffering. So the problem is not solved. To it, we could apply the Greek saying, the divine is not yet in being, but in becoming. The true divine would then be the secret within us and perhaps supreme above us. So there again, you see, secret within us is the horizontal, the psychic being, and perhaps supreme above us. Why is he using the word perhaps? Because when you are in ignorance, you don't know that there is a higher level of consciousness which solves the problem individually. Not for everybody, but individually. Okay? The secret within us and perhaps supreme above us. So see how accurate he is? He is using the word perhaps, and it gives a solution to the key to the sentence what he's saying. To find the divine within us and above us would be the real solution. So even the finding the divine above us is not a solution. Even finding the divine within us is not a solution. You have to find the solution in both. You have to get the psychic being as well as the self. And when that happens, then you have the true solution to the problem. You can.
Rangada, you have
Yeah.
Rangada,
Yeah.
you have told
Ah,
yesterday that you will tell us the story of Robert something.
of what?
Some Robert or somebody's story you are going to tell us today.
I told you, I just now recited,
Oh.
Robert Browning.
Okay.
Robert Browning is a poet, and his poetry I read out to you. I'll read out again to you. It is what Srimati is discussing here, the solution to the problem of pain and suffering. Robert Browning is saying, okay, I read out that poem to you just now, no? So I'll read it out again to you. Okay, so that's what he's saying, but that's not a solution. Okay, suppose you are Robert Browning and you say that everything is fine in the physical world. Look at everything, you will see. I'm repeating those lines, okay? They're very interesting. It's this one way of looking at things. And so they're saying there is a certain element of truth in it. Okay? So the 8 lines are in his poem. Robert Browning is a poet, okay? And actually his wife also was a poetess, and both were very good, okay? Elizabeth Browning and Robert Browning, both were poets. So he's saying in one of his poems, it's called Pippa Passes, okay? He says, the year is at the spring, okay? The winter has passed and the year has started spring. New life has come in. Look at that. Don't think of the winter. Think of the spring, okay? It is, everything is coming to life again. Look at that and enjoy life. And the day at the morn, okay? And the day is now, the morning has come. Why are you thinking of the night? Think of the day. It is morning now, full of light. The darkness has gone. Morning is at 7, and the hillsides dew pearl. Okay? Even the dew has fallen on the, and everything is so beautiful. That's what he's saying. There's a truth to it, says, but it's not very satisfying. Okay. Then, one second, there's the second. The lark is on the wing. Okay. The lark is a bird, and he's flying. He is not incapacitated. He's flying. Okay. The snail is on the thorn. Okay. The snail, you know what the snail is, no? Escargot. Okay. He's on the thorn, and the thorn should be actually making him suffer, but he's not. He's very happy there on that. God is in heaven, and all is right with the world. Okay? So this is I quoted this to show you that it is possible to take this attitude. Okay, and Srimati is saying this attitude may be correct at a certain level. You can solve your individual problem that way, but it's an example of a easy and cheap, shallow optimism. It is shallow because you're not looking at the suffering of others. You have solved your own problem by concentrating on the beauty of the world, and you're seeing everything positive, but you're not seeing the negative. Even if you see the negative, you are ignoring it. So it's a solution to the problem of suffering individually, but not at the universal level. Okay? It's not it's Robert Browning was a poet, and he's a good example of what Srimati is saying in this particular para. Okay. I read out the last sentence. The true divine would then be secret within us. Okay. Where is it gone? The true divine would then be secret within us and perhaps supreme above us. Okay. To find the divine within us and above us would be the real solution. To become perfect as that is perfect. To attain liberation by likeness to it or by attaining to the law of its nature. Sadrishya, sadharmya. Okay? You become like the divine. Sadrishya. You become similar to the divine. And sadharmya. Okay? Whatever is the divine work done, you are doing that. That is the true solution. That's what Srimati is saying. Okay? There is a very interesting image in the Vedas, okay, which goes like this. It explains how you can become the divine. there is the image of Indra, who is a divine being, and Kutsa. Even the name Kutsa suggests the imperfection. In Sanskrit, Kutsa. Okay. You have the Bengali word also, Kutsit, hopeless, bad. Okay. So they are riding in the same chariot. So Kutsa is the human being, which is imperfection, and Indra is the divine being, and the chariot is a human body. Okay? You have a human nature, but the divine is there in you, riding in the same chariot. Okay? And at the end of the journey, Kutsa becomes like Indra. He becomes divine in nature. Sadrishya Sadharmi. He becomes divine in nature. To such an extent, he becomes perfect like the divine, that only Indra's wife, Shachi, because of her purity, she is the one who knows who really Indra is, and the others cannot make out the difference between Kutsa and Indra. This is the story. Okay? And it's indicative of man becoming divine. Okay? To a certain extent, that also is there in the Gita. Arjuna and Sri Krishna are traveling in the same chariot. They are fighting in the same chariot. Both are there. The chariot is the body. The divine is there in your inside you, psychic being, and your outer nature of body, mind, life is the human part. And you can become the divine. And you can become the divine when you know your psychic being and you know your also the self. And you have to go to the self. So that is the real solution. If you know only the self, you can escape like the Buddhist. If you know only the psychic being, it will be like what he is describing here. You concentrate only on the divine, ignore the rest. That's what happens with the psychic being. When the psychic being comes forward, you start, tremendous enjoyment is there, tremendous ananda is there, and you don't even want to look at the suffering of others. But that's the solution. So solution saying you must have both. Then you get the solution. Okay? It's 8:30 and we have 5 minutes more. So perhaps we can read one more para. Or if you want, we can also stop today. But we can, I think, read. Archanadi, are you there?
I'm there, Angada, but I'm in the dispensary.
So, okay. Should we read that or should we leave it for next time?
If if Sumki can read, it is okay. But reading
Yes,
here will be a little.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's read
yes,
it. If the human
I will read.
consciousness
If the human consciousness were bound to the sense of imperfection and the acceptance of it as the law of our life and the very character of our existence, a reasoned acceptance that could answer in our human nature to the blind animal acceptance of the animal nature, then we might say that what we are marks the limit of a divine self-expression in us. We might believe too that our imperfections and sufferings worked for the general harmony and perfection of things, and console ourselves with this philosophic balm offered for our wounds, satisfied to move among the pitfalls of life with as much rational prudence or as much philosophic sagacity and resignation as our incomplete mental wisdom and our impatient vital parts permitted, or else taking refuge in the more consoling fervors of religion, we might submit to all as the will of God in the hope or the fate of recompense in a paradise beyond where we shall enter into a happier existence and put on a more pure and perfect nature. But there is an essential factor in our human consciousness and its workings which, no less than the reason, distinguishes it entirely from the animal. There is not only a mental part in us which recognizes the imperfection, there is a psychic part which rejects it. Our soul's dissatisfaction with imperfection as a law of life upon earth. its aspiration towards the elimination of all imperfections from our nature, not only in a heaven beyond where it would be automatically impossible to be imperfect, but here and now in a life where perfection has to be conquered by evolution and struggle, are as much a law of our being as that against which they revolt. They too are divine, a divine dissatisfaction, a divine aspiration. In them is the inherent light of a power within which maintains them in us, so that the divine may not only be there as a hidden reality in our spiritual secrecies, but unfold itself in the evolution of nature.
So this para again, he is insisting on that. If you have a mind and you have a psychic being in you, and when the mind is seeing, it recognizes the imperfections of the physical world, but cannot find a solution to it. And it does not reject it. It's saying, yes, it is imperfect. Then it stops at that. But the psychic being is one which wants only divinity, and it does not accept the suffering and the imperfection and the lack of capacity. It does not accept. So the psychic being is rejecting it, whereas the mind does not reject but recognizes the imperfection of nature. That's what he's saying. So I'll quickly read out to you the summary, and next time we can go sentence by sentence. Okay. So now what he's saying in this one: if man accepts the imperfections, just 1 second. Yeah. If man accepts the imperfections of earthly life as fixed, unchanging law, which he passively accepts with reason, just as an animal does without reasoning, then man's nature would be the limit of divine manifestation. Nothing more could be done. Okay? Accepting the world as it is, we would console ourselves either with philosophic calm equality, or we could seek refuge in religious fervor and hope for perfection in heaven. That's what Christianity also does, and that's what also Islam does. Okay? But man has in him more than reason. Reason recognizes evil and imperfection, but the psychic being rejects them. The recognition of evil is not enough. There will also be rejection, so that the psychic being cannot accept. The soul has an aspiration for perfection, not only in heaven, but even here on earth itself. Okay, it is not enough to, like the Islamists say, Islam, go to heaven and you will get all the enjoyment that you get here on earth. You will get. Okay, so that's the thing. The soul not only accepts the divine reality within man, but also insists on the evolution without. That means in the physical world, on earth, it wants also absolutely the reality, the perfection, even in the physical world. That's what he's saying in this para. So we stop here today. We have already gone 2 minutes beyond our time, and we can see that next time. So we'll just make a note of the that we have to redo if the human consciousness, page 410. Just make a note, because I am on my phone. I can't make the note. Okay, you make the note. So, au revoir, everybody. Have a nice day.